Most people think they know what they mean when they use the word religion, but things get complicated if you look at the term more closely and if you try to identify an objective definition that can be used in social science. This is partly because religion takes many diverse forms around the world, and it's also changed over time. Some definitions of religion are inadequate because they only apply to some religions and not others. They may also focus on the functions of religion without saying what religion itself is. A clear and accurate definition of religion is important for the following reasons. First, sociologists need a reasonably clear idea of what they're going to study before they study it. In other words, they need a clearly defined sensitizing concept of religion which will give them a general reference for what to study and some guidance in identifying empirical instances of religion. Second, some definition of religion is also necessary in order to distinguish between activities, groups and organisations which are or are not religious. Now, there's broad agreement that Islam, Judaism or the Roman Catholic Church are religions, for example, but there's less agreement about the Church of Scientology. Third, it's important to be able to describe and explain the relationship between the religious and the secular aspects of social life, as well as the role that religion should play in policy and law. There'll be disagreement, for example, about whether the law concerning marriage should be determined ultimately by secular or religious concerns. Is marriage primarily about secular issues like equality and rights, or about religious issues like the way marriage has been defined in a religion's guiding text such as the Bible or the Quran? Any definition of religion needs to be broad enough to cover the diversity of its forms in order to be accurate about the main properties and characteristics of religions. The definition also has to make it possible to distinguish between the essential and enduring features of religions and those features which might be contingent and transient. This has been quite a challenge. Max Weber, for example, said that one can't define religion or to say what it is prior to studying the actions that people define themselves as religious. He wrote that he wasn't concerned with the essence of religion, but with the conditions and effects of a particular type of social action. The external causes of religious behaviour are so diverse, said Weber, that an understanding of this behaviour can only be achieved from the viewpoint of the subjective experiences, notions and purposes of the individuals concerned. In short, from the viewpoint of the religious behaviour's meaning. Some scholars have gone so far as to argue that a comprehensive definition of religion is impossible. The anthropologist Tal al-Assad, for example, has written that there can be no universal definition of religion, not only because its constituent elements and relationships are historically specific, but because that definition is itself the historical product of discursive processes. However, there are two problems with Assad's argument. First, he assumes that if religions are entirely distinct from one another, that means they can't have elements in common. But different religions can believe in different supernatural forces while having a shared belief that supernatural forces exist. Second, Assad assumes that because a definition has a history, that means that it can't objectively refer to some phenomena outside itself. But in fact, it is possible for a definition that changes over time to be referring to something that objectively exists. The concept of gravity, for example, has a history, but this doesn't mean that it isn't referring to a real objective force. Another researcher, Stephen Bruce, addressed the issue by comparing sociology to chemical engineering. He says that chemical engineers undoubtedly argue about what sort of cement is best suited for lining the holes drilled under the sea for oil wells. However, he says it's hard to imagine that they argue over the meaning of the term cement or whether, in fact, cement actually exists. In Bruce's view, it's possible then to develop a fairly clear definition of what religion is. He defines religion as beliefs, actions and institutions that assume the existence of supernatural entities with powers of action, such as gods, or impersonal powers or processes possessed of moral purpose, such as karma in the Hindu tradition, which can set the conditions of or intervene in human affairs. He says that while this definition is long-winded, it includes everything that is normally meant by religion. It accords with almost every common use of the term religion, and it's a good enough starting point for sociological investigation. Understanding what a religion is and what it is not just of academic interest. It can also be tied up with the law or social policy and affect the rights of individuals and groups within society. For example, is the Church of Scientology a religion or not? The way this question has been dealt with illustrates how the boundary between the religious and the secular dimensions of social life remain blurred. Scientology was developed by US science fiction writer L. Ron Hubbard in 1950. Hubbard claimed that an accumulation of unpleasant experiences over time can disturb the reincarnated spirits he believed reside within human beings. Scientology provides a treatment devised by Hubbard to purge people of the effects of these experiences. In the United Kingdom, prior to 2013, the authorities ruled that the Church of Scientology was not a religion, and they refused to allow it to register its centre as a place of worship. This meant that Scientology was denied the tax exemptions that were granted to other charitable religious groups. The British government also prohibited foreign Scientologists from entering Britain between 1968 and 1980 if their declared aim was to further the cause of Scientology. This was in relation to public concerns that Scientology was a dangerous cult, that its treatment was fraudulent, and that its real aim was commercial and not religious. In Australia, however, Scientology was recognised as a religion by the High Court in 1983. In the court's view, this was because it met two criteria of religion. First, belief in a supernatural being, thing or principle, and second, a pattern of behaviour based on that belief. This ruling enabled Scientology to gain access to a range of exemptions available to other religious organisations in Australia, such as exemptions from payroll tax, sales tax and local government rates. It also gives the ministers of religion an exemption from military conscription. The British Supreme Court followed Australia's lead in 2013 when it unanimously ruled in another case that Scientology is a religion. In doing so, it overturned 158 years of law which had been based on the idea that the worship of a god, not just a supernatural principle, is a defining characteristic of what a religion is. Despite these sorts of instabilities in the definition of religion, it's still been possible to perceive and analyse the distinctively religious aspects of society and social change, and the sociology of religion makes a number of useful contributions to the broader understanding of the role played by religion in social stability and social transformation. In summary, I talked first about how the sociology of religion takes religion as its subject matter, but it hasn't always been clear what religion is and whether it can be objectively defined. Second, a clear and accurate definition of religion is necessary in order to demarcate religious subject matter, sensitise sociologists to the field, and assist them in developing explanations of religious phenomena. Third, one useful definition of religion is by the British sociologist Steve Bruce. He defines religion as beliefs, actions and institutions that assume the existence of supernatural entities with powers of action or impersonal powers or processes possessed of moral purpose, which can set the conditions of or intervene in human affairs. Fourth, definitions of religion matter not just in sociology, but in the wider society, where legal recognition of religion can confer rights, privileges and legitimacy on those who can successfully claim it.